Timon of Athens. So my first non-intro video on our Shakespeare is going to be about a very obscure play of Shakespeare called Timon of Athens, which many people have never heard of, and I guarantee most people have never seen or read. But it happens to be one of my very favorite Shakespeare plays, and one that I think is very, very timely, and has been on and off again for a long time. But particularly right now, I think it has a lot to say to us. So let's talk about it. First of all, Timon of Athens. Give a little bit of a history lesson about Timon of Athens. Timon of Athens is one of the plays that we know very little about in terms of its production history. Right? All we have as far as scripts is the script that was published in the first folio. It was never published in quarto form. And the version that we have in the first folio has a lot of kind of holes and a lot of kind of issues with it, which makes scholars wonder if the play was ever performed at all. Many scholars actually think that it's an unfinished script because the language is not necessarily Shakespeare's best. It seems a little bit haphazard. It's not as poetic as some of his best works, but also the plot. There's some very developed plot elements, some very underdeveloped plot elements. Some things just feel unfinished. And then also the ending is very unsatisfactory for many scholars. That coupled with the fact that we don't have any record of it ever having been performed, that we have no quarto of it, although that's not that unusual. There are several of Shakespeare's plays that don't have quartos for them, but I digress. But all of it put together makes scholars say, maybe this is not a play that was ever performed. Maybe it was. I don't know. I happen to think it's very performable. When do scholars think it was written in Shakespeare's career? Well, scholarly consensus puts it in about 1605. They think Shakespeare wrote it in about 1605, right before King Lear, kind of not the very end of his career, but in the later portion of his career. Really after he had stopped writing a lot of comedies and was really exploring some darker, somber, serious subject matter is about the time that scholarly consensus says that he wrote the play. I actually think there's a very good chance that it could have been written in 1608 and actually wrote a conference paper about my idea that maybe it was written in 1608. It's really not that important when it comes down to it, especially not important when it comes down to talking about how Timon of Athens relates to us today. And what I want to talk about with Timon of Athens and how it relates to us today is the idea of how much our perspective, the idea of how much our opinions and the way we view the world can change when the shoe is on the other foot. And this can relate to politics, this relates to falls from grace, this relates to privilege, it relates to whenever we experience major changes, sometimes we betray our own philosophy. So, before I get to that, I want to talk about Timon of Athens' plot and characters, because many people are not familiar with it. Alright? So, here we go. The plot of Timon of Athens. So, in the beginning of Timon of Athens, the very first scene, Timon is a wealthy man who is very generous, very magnanimous, very popular. He has lots of friends. He always throws these lavish parties. And the very first scene is one of these lavish parties. He's thrown a party and people from all over Athens have come. And Timon behaves almost comically generous with people. And this is shown in a variety of ways. There are a lot of folks he just gives money to. There is a poet who writes a poem for Timon that he pays money for. There's a jeweler who sells Timon a jewel. Timon then turns around and gives that jewel to someone else. Timon gives money to break someone out of prison. Timon gives money for this. Timon gives money for that. Wealthy people, he gives his horses away during this party. It's almost absurd how generous and how magnanimous Timon is to many people. There are some other people at this party as well, who are not necessarily just there for money, but who are friends of Timon's. One is a cynical philosopher named Apomantus. The thing that's important about him, though, is that he has not only is he not ever asked Timon for money, but also he makes fun of Timon a lot for giving so much of his money away and thinks Timon is a fool. Another person at this party is Alcibiades, who is a general for the military, and he's somebody also who Timon has known for a long time, and Timon does frequently give him gifts. But Alcibiades seems to be generally a pretty cool guy, and somebody who's not necessarily just out for himself. And during this party, not only does Timon give everything away, but then also at the party, he gives this rousing speech about the value of friendship and how great it is to have friends who care about each other and will give each other things. And everyone's all like, oh yes, yes, Timon, you are correct about that. After the party is over, Timon's steward, Flavius, comes up and says to Timon, hey Timon, I don't know if you know this, but you are out of cash. And Timon's like, what do you mean? I have so much money, I'm so wealthy. And Flavius is like, yeah, you know how I've been telling you for a long, long time that you're giving away too much money and you need to get it under control? Well, you haven't gotten it under control, and now you're out of money, and your lands need to be sold. And not only that, your creditors are here demanding your money. So Timon is out of cash, his lands have to be sold, and after his lands are sold, he still doesn't have enough money to pay off his debt, so Timon is totally broke and really out of luck. So what does he do? Well, he goes to his friends. Some of the wealthy people, not everybody who was at the party, but some of the choice wealthy people who were at the party, and he sends his servants off to go ask for favors of them. To go and say, up, my man Timon gave you some money in your time of need. He's asking for some money from you now, so can you help him out? And each one of the people that servants go to ask for money turn him down. They basically laugh at him and be like, ha ha ha, no, we cannot give Timon any money right now. We have our own needs. Forget you, Timon. So Timon is out of lands, he's out of money, he has out of friends. So what does he do? He invites all of the people who turned him down for getting money to another party. Of course they show up, expecting him to give them gifts again, but he does not. Instead, he brings out a bunch of dishes for a meal, and he uncovers the dishes, and what's in them? Oh, it's not food, it's rocks and warm water. So Timon basically gives them rocks and lukewarm water, and overturns the table, throws rocks at them, and basically curses them and gives them holy hell for having been awful and being terrible people. And not only that, Timon then runs off into the wilderness, never to be seen in Athens again. In the meantime, Alcibiades, the general who was at Timon's party in Act 1, Scene 1, is before the Senate. And he is begging for the life of one of his men who killed somebody in the heat of passion. And he has been given a very serious sentence, and Alcibiades thinks it's too rough, that they have sentenced him for like premeditated murder rather than, manslaughter, basically. And so he's there begging for leniency for his man. The Senate says, nope, he's getting what he deserves. So Alcibiades is like, okay, that's not cool. I hate you guys, and basically decides to amass an army to destroy Athens. Quite a turn for Alcibiades, who in the beginning of the play seemed pretty chill, and now kind of seems a bit like he's overreacting. Friend was given too strong of a sentence, I'm going to destroy the city. Timon, in the meantime, after fleeing to the wilderness, goes off to live in a cave. And it's not just any cave. The cave has a large quantity of gold buried in it, because irony. People start to realize that Timon is living in this cave, and also that Timon has got a lot of gold. So Timon is now in a position, like he was in the beginning of the play, to be able to give a lot of money to people. And what's interesting here is that Timon doesn't just hoard it, right? Timon doesn't just be like, no, I'm going to sit on my money and you can't have any. Actually, kind of the opposite. Only this time, when he gives it away viciously. It's a complete change of personality. So some of the people who come to visit him are the poet who was in the first scene, comes back. He flings money at them and gives them a speech about how terrible people are. But interestingly, Alcibiades shows up with 2 prostitutes and tells Timon, hey, I'm going to destroy the city now. And Timon is all like, great, here's some money so you can go do that, go amass an army. So Timon gives him money, not out of friendship, but out of giving him help in destroying Athens. And then he also gives money to the prostitutes, encouraging the prostitutes to therefore have more means to go about Athens spreading venereal disease. So he's giving money away as poison rather than as generosity. And then a couple of other people that visit him, interestingly, are Apemantus, who, the cynical philosopher, who did not ask him for money in Act 1, and still does not ask him for money here in the cave. Apemantus remains cynical. Apemantus reminds Timon that, hey, you gave away money too much, that was stupid. And Timon delivers a very, very interesting speech about how it doesn't make sense for Apemantus to be so cynical, because Apemantus has never known wealth, has never known grace, and therefore has never experienced a fall from grace. And if you haven't experienced a fall from grace, then how can you hate humanity? If humanity has never loved you and then hated you, how can you be so cynical? It's a really interesting speech. And then the senators actually also visit Timon in his cave, asking for Timon to convince Alcibiades to not wage war on Athens. Timon refuses to do what they wish, but he does offer them a tree to hang themselves on, so that's a thing. So the scene then moves to Athens, to the senators and Alcibiades. Alcibiades is at the gate, the wall of Athens, ready to wage war. The senators are trying to bargain with him, basically saying, hey, you know, you don't really need to do this. And Alcibiades is like, hey, there's some bad stuff going down here. Y'all terrible people. And the senators try to offer up his enemies. He says he just wants to make penance for Timon. He wants Timon to be brought back into people's good graces, and he feels bad for Timon. And the senators are like, that's cool. But then one of Alcibiades' soldiers shows up and says, oh, hey, Alcibiades, y'all, Timon is dead. He died in his cave. Here's his epitaph. And Alcibiades reads Timon's epitaph, which basically says, hey, people are terrible. So Alcibiades is like, huh, that's interesting. You know what? Give me my enemies and that'll be good enough. I'll come in, I'll wage war on those who are my enemies, but I'll be peaceful to those who are not. The end. And that's it. Alcibiades doesn't even go into the city. The play ends with him outside the walls, promising to both wage peace and wage war. We don't even see Timon die. We see Timon yelling at people like, get off my lawn, and then the next scene, we hear pronounced that he's dead. And that's it. What I want to talk about today as it relates to this play has to do with how much we can change when, as it were, the shoe is on the other foot, or when the political winds blow, or when our position of privilege changes in our lives. And I want to focus kind of a little bit on politics right now. And I don't want to get into like who's right and who's wrong, even though I have opinions. I have very strong opinions about this sort of thing. But I'm trying to look at it a little bit more generally. Right now, it's June 2017. We're in the era of Donald Trump as president. Not only are we in the era of Donald Trump as president, but we're in the era of FBI investigations into the Trump campaign's collusion with Russia. Now, the Democrats, those who oppose Donald Trump, are very, very supportive of the FBI's investigation into Donald Trump and are spurring it on, and in fact, really have pretty much been convicting Donald Trump since day one of his presidency. In fact, before he was president, Democrats were pretty much, he's guilty of collusion, he needs to be locked up, he needs to be impeached, really from the time he was elected. But are very supportive of the FBI probe, the investigation, the special counsel, Robert Mueller, looking into things, and are really egging it on and are very supportive of it. While the Republicans and Trump supporters and supportive news outlets such as Fox News are actually calling on the FBI probe to end, are skeptical of it, saying that it's wrong and that it should end and that there's not going to be anything found and all of this stuff. And basically are questioning whether or not it's just political and politicized and there's no value to it. I find this very interesting because not 6 months ago, the tables were completely turned, completely the opposite with Hillary Clinton. She, during the campaign, was under FBI investigation for whether or not her private email server was a problem for classified documents while she was Secretary of State. What's interesting here is the same people who are calling the investigation into Trump frivolous and inappropriate and shouldn't be talked about publicly were the same people who were really supportive of the probe into Hillary Clinton and were very pro-FBI investigations, pro it being public information. And the folks who are pro the Trump investigation were opposed to the Hillary Clinton investigation. And so basically what it comes down to is that depending on which foot the shoe is on affects whether or not you think FBI probes against public people are a good thing or a bad thing. And it's kind of interesting how much things vacillate. This is very much like Timon to me, who, while he was on top, thought everything about generosity and thought friendship was wonderful, while he was in a position to be giving things away and in a position to be generous. But then the minute he was in a position of being needy, that moment, Timon's personality completely changed. From generous, magnanimous, friendship-oriented, to cynical, to hating humanity, to egging on the destruction of humanity. And I think we do the same thing. When the shoe is on the other foot, we become hypocrites. And that's something that I think we could do better on as humans. A little bit better on consistency. I think we could do better. And then the other thing that I want to talk about with this is there's not a middle ground for Timon, right? He goes from absolute generosity to absolute cynicism. And I feel like we do that today in our politics. We go from absolutely loving the president to absolutely hating the president, depending on which party they're in. And this is not just Barack Obama and Donald Trump. It goes back to, Bill Clinton, to George H.W. Bush, to Jimmy Carter, to Ronald Reagan. And we have so much trouble actually being neutral, as does Timon. And I kind of wish, not that I think we all need to be cynical philosophers, but if there's one person in this story who I think we can look to as somebody who is at least consistent, that would be Epamantis. And interestingly, Epamantis is the one who never comes from a position of privilege. Timon says you couldn't possibly be cynical because you've never been wealthy. You've never fallen from grace. You've never gone from men adoring you to men hating you. I don't think we all need to be more cynical, but we could definitely all be more, consistent. So those are my thoughts on Timon. Let me know what you think. You may not agree with me about Timon, about something I've said about Timon of Athens, about kind of how I've related it to today, but I'd love to hear what you think. If you're watching this, and I really don't know to expect that many people to watch it, but if you're watching this and you want to comment below, please do. Thanks for watching.